The air shimmered with spectral dust as Alaric stood at the edge of the void precipice. Stars gleamed like scattered gems across the inky canvas of space, their light distorted through the kaleidoscope of intersecting realities. The multiverse stretched before him, infinite worlds, infinite possibilities, infinite souls, and somewhere among them, the cosmic witch continued to harvest heroes. Alaric adjusted the soul-forged blade at his hip, its metal humming with quiet energy against his scarred palm. The sight dagger, they called it, capable of piercing through the darkest corners of one's soul. A weapon for justice. A weapon for vengeance. You still think about them, don't you? Rissa's voice cut through his contemplation. The light mage approached, her white robes billowing in the cosmic winds that swept across Hespera's highest cliffs. Her hands glowed faintly, illuminating the ancient texts she always carried. Alaric didn't turn. Every day, the Council of Archmages has declared the frontier a restricted zone. They believe Kalindra's influence is spreading. A humorless smile crossed Alaric's weathered face. The Council is always declaring something. Meanwhile, heroes fall, and their souls feed her power. His fingers traced the edge of his breastplate where an insignia had been scratched away. The mark of the Light City. A past he'd abandoned when bureaucracy failed to save his comrades. The Dark Era had begun 5 years ago, when the Soul Plague first swept through the Ixaris galaxy. What started as whispers of emptiness, people found alive but hollow, their bodies breathing while their essence vanished, had grown into a pandemic of soul theft. Then came rumors of the Great Soul Book, an artifact of terrible power that could absorb and harness the essence of the most powerful beings. Rissa stepped closer, her scholarly demeanor softening. I've deciphered more of the ancient scrolls. The book wasn't created for evil, Alaric. Originally, it was meant to preserve knowledge, to save the wisdom of dying civilizations. Tools become weapons in the wrong hands, Alaric replied, finally turning to face her. And Kalindra's hands are soaked in the essence of 1,000 heroes. The memory flashed unbidden. Alaric's squadron ambushed on the plains of Doraith. The battle had been fierce but straightforward until she appeared. Kalindra hadn't bothered with physical combat. She simply opened the book, its pages glowing with sickly luminescence, and Commander Varen, brave, unbreakable Varen, had collapsed, his body convulsing as tendrils of light pulled from his mouth and eyes, streaming into the book's hungry pages. I held him afterward, Alaric said quietly. His body was warm, his heart was beating, but his eyes, there was nothing there. Just emptiness. He clenched his fist. I swore on his empty shell that I would stop her before the book was completed. Rissa placed a gentle hand on his armored shoulder. You won't face her alone. The stars have aligned, literally. The ancient texts speak of a convergence, a moment when the dimensional barriers thin. If Kalindra is gathering souls of power, it's for something specific. The 1,000-star temple, came a new voice from the shadows. Nira emerged, her dark archer's garb blending perfectly with the night. The shadow bow slung across her back pulsed with obsidian energy. My sources in the Shadow Covenant have confirmed it. She's planning a ritual at the Cosmic Nexus. Alaric studied the fierce determination in Nira's eyes. He knew her story. Her entire family had been soul-drained when Kalindra's forces swept through the outer colonies. The archer's quest for vengeance mirrored his own, though her methods often teetered on the edge of darkness. The temple is guarded by soul beasts and dimensional rifts, Alaric cautioned. We'll need more than vengeance to reach it. Then it's fortunate I've completed my calculations, announced Tovan, the alchemist's voice echoing as he climbed the stone steps to join them. His mechanical arm whirred softly, adjusting a series of vials that glowed with concoctions of his own invention. Soul sigils, temporary protections against her extraction magic. Not perfect, but they should buy us time. Alaric looked at the three who had joined his quest when all others deemed it suicidal. Rissa, the light mage who believed knowledge could overcome darkness. Nira, the shadow archer whose arrows never missed their mark. Tovan, the brilliant alchemist who fused science and magic in ways the rigid academy had deemed heretical. They were outcasts, all of them, and perhaps that made them the perfect team to face a threat that the established powers refused to acknowledge. The path to the temple crosses the death abyss, Alaric said, testing their resolve one final time. Many have entered, none have returned whole. Nira's lips curved in a deadly smile. Neither has anyone who's crossed my family. Risa held up her glowing tome. I've translated the ancient passage routes. There are safe paths, difficult, but navigable. Tovan simply tapped his mechanical arm. I didn't build this beauty to sit in a laboratory. Alaric nodded, a rare warmth kindling in his chest. Not hope. He'd abandoned that luxury long ago. But purpose, direction, the possibility of justice. Then we leave at dawn, he declared, turning his gaze back to the stars. Kalindra has collected enough souls. It's time she faced her own reckoning. Little did he know that his soul, wounded, resilient, and harboring secrets even he didn't understand, would become the key to everything. Whens? The crimson skies of Hespera gave way to the absolute darkness of space as their vessel. The astral vanguard. Broke atmosphere. Tovan manned the controls, his fingers dancing across the alchemical engines with practiced precision. The ship wasn't large, sleek and built for speed rather than comfort. But it carried the hopes of countless worlds whose heroes had fallen to Kalindra's hunger. Alaric stood at the viewing portal, watching as the planet that had become his reluctant home shrank to a distant point of light. Hespera, with its floating cities and arcane universities, had been a refuge after the military disbanded his unit. The official reason: psychological evaluation following traumatic soul proximity. The truth: silencing witnesses to a threat they weren't prepared to confront. You're brooding again, Risa observed, joining him at the viewport. She had exchanged her formal robes for more practical attire, layers of enchanted fabric designed for protection rather than ceremony. Still, the sigils of the Light City Academy were embroidered at her collar, a reminder of her academic roots. Planning, Alaric corrected. There's a difference. Is there? She smiled, though her eyes remained serious. The texts I've been studying suggest Kalindra wasn't always what she became. Before the Dark Era, she was a researcher, like me. She sought knowledge about soul energy as a healing force. Alaric's jaw tightened. I don't need her origin story, Risa. I've seen what she is now. Understanding your enemy won't bring back Varen, or the others. He turned from the viewport. We should review the approach to the Death Abyss. According to the star charts, we'll reach its edge by tomorrow. Risa sighed but didn't press further. Instead, she unfurled an ancient map across the ship's central table. The parchment glowed with interstellar routes marked in luminescent ink that shifted as if alive. The abyss isn't just a physical space, she explained as Nira and Tovan joined them. It's a tear in reality where souls who've been separated from bodies sometimes drift. The dangers are both physical and ethereal. Nira leaned over the map, her sharp eyes tracing the faint pathways. These routes look like they shift. They do, Risa confirmed. The paths realign based on cosmic resonance. We'll need to time our approach with the alignment of the 3 moons of Zephyr. She pointed to a distant system on the map. That occurs once every 60 days. Which is? Tovan consulted his mechanical chronometer. Tomorrow, cutting it rather close, aren't we? Alaric studied the complex patterns. Intentionally. Kalindra will expect anyone trying to reach the temple to use the optimal crossing times. We'll have surprise on our side. At the cost of increased danger, Risa noted, though without judgment. Everything worthwhile carries risk. Alaric replied. He traced his finger along one particularly narrow pathway through the abyss. This route? It skirts the edge of the whispering voids. Dangerous. But the soul winds are weaker there. Nira nodded appreciatively. Smart. The shadow currents are also stronger near the voids. My arrows will fly truer there. But the gravitational distortions, Tovan began, can be compensated for. Alaric cut in. You're the best pilot in 3 systems. Tovan, if anyone can navigate it, you can. The alchemist straightened with pride, his mechanical arm whirring. Well, when you put it that way, a grin spread across his face. I'll make adjustments to the engine matrix. We might need an extra boost to punch through the distortion fields. As Tovan returned to the controls and Nira moved to inventory their weapons, Risa lingered, her gaze steady on Alaric. There's something else, she said softly. Something about Kalindra that I haven't shared yet. Alaric raised an eyebrow. And that is? Risa hesitated, choosing her words carefully. The archives contain personnel records from before the Dark Era. You and Kalindra. You served together. Alaric, in the same exploratory division of the Galactic Armada. The blood drained from Alaric's face. That's impossible. I would remember. Would you? Risa countered gently. How much of your past before Commander Varen recruited you do you actually recall? Alaric opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. The truth was, his memories before joining Varen's elite unit were fragmented, hazy. He'd always attributed it to the trauma of the frontier wars. But now? The soul book doesn't just take souls, Risa continued. It can fragment memories, reshape perceptions. What if your drive to stop Kalindra isn't just about justice for Varen? What if it's about something more personal? Before Alaric could respond, the ship lurched violently. Emergency lights flooded the cabin with crimson illumination as Tovan's voice rang out from the cockpit. We've got company, Imperial Galaxy fleet vessels, approaching fast from the Hesperian defense perimeter. Alaric cursed, pushing the disturbing revelation aside. The Council must have detected our departure. They're trying to stop us before we even reach the abyss. Nira was already at the weapons console, her fingers flying across the controls. 3 cruisers, standard Imperial configuration. They're charging ion cannons. Evasive maneuvers, Alaric ordered, strapping himself into the command chair. Tovan, can you push the engines? The alchemist's laugh held a manic edge. Can a quantum particle exist in multiple states simultaneously? Hold on to something. The astral vanguard lurched again, this time intentionally, as Tovan engaged a series of boosters that shouldn't have been possible on a vessel this size. Alaric felt the familiar weight of acceleration pressing him into his seat as stars blurred outside the viewport. They're still in pursuit, Nira reported, her voice tight. And they've launched interceptors. Risa had taken her position at the defensive systems. Arcane shields at maximum, but they won't hold against sustained fire. Alaric's mind raced. The Imperial Galaxy fleet wasn't known for subtlety. They would destroy the Vanguard rather than allow them to proceed to the abyss. And while Tovan's modifications made their ship fast, it wasn't designed for prolonged combat against military vessels. The Seren Nebula, he decided suddenly. Tovan, change course, take us into the heart of it. The radiation levels, Tovan began, are high enough to mask our signature but not immediately lethal. Alaric finished. The Imperial ships are too large to follow safely. It's our best chance. Tovan nodded, adjusting their trajectory. The viewscreen filled with swirling clouds of cosmic dust and energy as they plunged toward the nebula's multicolored expanse. Interceptors still on our tail. Nira warned. They're smaller. They might follow us in. Then we give them a reason to reconsider. Alaric replied. Risa, channel shield energy to the aft deflectors. Nira, prepare a spread of shadow arrows on my mark. The ship shuddered as the first volley of fire from the interceptors impacted their shields. Risa's hands glowed with arcane energy as she reinforced their defenses. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Now, Nira, Alaric commanded as they crossed the nebula's threshold. Nira unleashed a barrage of shadow-infused projectiles, not directly at the pursuing vessels, but into the nebula itself. The arrows detonated in a spectacular cascade, igniting pockets of volatile gas. Chain reactions spread outward, creating a wall of flame and radiation behind them. through the rear scanners. Alaric watched with grim satisfaction as the interceptors veered away, unwilling to brave the inferno. The larger cruisers had already fallen back, maintaining a distant position at the nebula's edge. "They'll establish a blockade," he noted. "Wait for us to emerge." Tovan guided the ship deeper into the swirling clouds. Then we don't emerge where they expect. The nebula connects to the outer edge of the death abyss through a series of natural wormholes. Unstable, but navigable. "With your piloting and Rissa's calculations?" Alaric agreed. He turned to the light mage. "Can you map a course?" She was already consulting her ancient texts, cross-referencing them with the ship's sensors. "Yes, but Alaric, about what I said before." "Later." He cut her off, his tone softening slightly at her concerned expression. "First, we survive, then we can discuss possibilities." But as they ventured deeper into the nebula's embrace, Alaric couldn't shake the disquiet her words had planted. Had he known Kalindra before she became the cosmic witch? And if so, what did that mean for his quest, and for the emptiness in his own memories where his past should have been? The Seren Nebula enveloped them like a shroud of luminescent silk, its colors shifting from violet to indigo to a deep, pulsing crimson that bathed the ship's interior in blood-red light. Cosmic dust particles glittered against the viewports, occasionally igniting in brief, brilliant flashes when they contacted the vessel's energy shields. 3 days into their journey through the nebula's shifting pathways, the initial triumph of their escape had faded into a tense vigilance. The astral vanguard moved cautiously through the swirling gases, its sensors constantly scanning for the natural wormholes that would lead them to the death abyss. So far, they had located 2, both too unstable for safe passage. In the ship's small galley, Alaric sat alone, a holographic projection of their trajectory hovering above the table. His fingers occasionally adjusted the course, testing variables, searching for options. The constant crimson glow from outside had begun to wear on him, reminding him too much of battlefields illuminated by emergency beacons. "You should rest," Tovan said, entering with 2 steaming cups. He placed one before Alaric, a bitter, alchemically enhanced stimulant that the former knight had developed a taste for during long campaigns. "I've programmed the autopilot to follow Rissa's calculations for the next 6 hours. Alaric accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "And you, when did you last sleep?" Tavan tapped his mechanical arm with a wry smile. "This beauty regulates my biochemistry. I can go 3 days without sleep before performance degradation becomes significant." "That's not an answer." "4 days, if you must know." The alchemist shrugged. "But I'm not the one having the nightmares." Alaric's cup paused halfway to his lips. "Excuse me?" "Ship this small, walls this thin." Tovan settled into the chair opposite him. "I've heard you calling out names I don't recognize, and one I do, Kalindra." Setting the cup down carefully, Alaric studied his companion. Tovan had always been the most pragmatic of their group, approaching problems with scientific detachment rather than emotional investment. Perhaps that made him the safest confidant. "Rissa found records," Alaric admitted, "suggesting that Kalindra and I served together before everything, before I joined Varen's unit." Tovan's eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected. Do you remember any of it?" "No, and that's what concerns me." Alaric ran a hand through his hair, longer now than military regulations would have permitted. "What if I'm compromised in some way? What if she did something to my memories?" What if the connection gives you an advantage?" Tovan countered. "Knowledge is power, Alaric, even fragmented knowledge." Before Alaric could respond, Nira's voice came through the ship's communication system. "Everyone to the bridge, now. We've got company, and it's not the Imperial fleet." They abandoned their drinks, moving swiftly through the narrow corridors. On the bridge, Nira stood at the weapons console, her posture rigid with tension. Rissa occupied the sensor station, her expression grave. "What is it?" Alaric demanded. In answer, Rissa adjusted the view screen. The The nebula's crimson haze parted to reveal a massive vessel drifting in their path. Unlike the sleek, standardized design of Imperial ships, this craft was asymmetrical, its hull composed of what appeared to be fused fragments of different vessels. Pulsing tendrils of energy periodically erupted from its surface, testing the surrounding space like the appendages of some cosmic predator. "Soul Harvester," Nira said quietly, the hatred in her voice palpable. "One of Kalindra's collector ships?" Alaric studied the monstrosity. He had heard of these vessels but never encountered one directly. They were said to sweep through vulnerable colonies, extracting souls en masse for Kalindra's experiments. "Life signs?" he asked. Rissa shook her head. "None that register as conventional, but there are energy patterns, rhythmic fluctuations that might be soul residue." "It's dormant," Tovan observed, examining the sensor data over Rissa's shoulder. "Minimal power signature. It might be damaged or in some kind of standby mode." "Or it's a trap," Nira suggested darkly. Alaric considered their options. The Harvester blocked the most direct path through this section of the nebula. Going around would cost them precious time and fuel. But approaching such a vessel carried obvious risks. "Tovan, can you determine if it's truly dormant or just waiting?" The alchemist hesitated. "Not with certainty from this distance. We'd need to get closer for a detailed scan." "Which is exactly what it wants," Nira muttered. "Not necessarily," Rissa interjected. "The ancient texts describe harvesters as semi-autonomous. They operate on programmed parameters rather than continuous direct control. If this one is damaged or low on energy, it might not register us as a threat." Alaric finished. A plan began to form in his mind. "Or as an opportunity." "You're not suggesting we board that thing," Nira said incredulously. Alaric's grim expression was answer enough. "If it's one of Kalindra's vessels, it might contain information. Navigation data that could lead us directly to the Thousand-Star Temple. Maybe even insights into her plans. Or it could drain our souls the moment we step aboard," Nira countered. "Not if we're prepared." Alaric turned to Tovan. "Those soul sigils you've been developing, how effective are they?" The alchemist straightened. "Theoretically, they should provide significant protection against standard soul extraction techniques, but I haven't exactly had the opportunity to field test them against actual soul-draining technology." "Then consider this your field test." Alaric's decision was made. "Prepare the sigils. Rissa, gather any protective enchantments you can muster. Nira, I want you to remain on the vanguard, ready to extract us or destroy the Harvester if necessary." The Shadow Archer's eyes narrowed. "You're benching me." "I'm ensuring we have a fallback position," Alaric corrected. "If something goes wrong, you're our best hope for a rescue, or a mercy killing." Nira held his gaze for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. "Fine. But if I don't hear from you every 15 minutes, I'm coming in after you. And I won't be subtle about it." "I wouldn't expect otherwise." Alaric turned back to the view screen, studying the ominous vessel. "Tovan, bring us in slowly. Minimal power signature, passive scans only. Let's not wake the beast if it is truly sleeping." As the astral vanguard crept toward the dormant Harvester, Alaric felt a strange sensation, not quite déjà vu, but something similar. A familiarity that shouldn't exist. Had he encountered such a vessel before, in those missing memories? Or was it something else, some connection to Kalindra herself, reaching across space to touch his consciousness? The Harvester grew larger in the view screen, its grotesque amalgamation of ship parts becoming more apparent. Some sections were clearly salvaged from military vessels, others from civilian transports. All had been fused together in ways that defied conventional engineering, bound by tendrils of what appeared to be solidified energy. "Boarding point identified," Tovan announced, highlighting a section on the tactical display. What appears to be a maintenance airlock, still intact and potentially functional. "Any signs of internal activity?" Alaric asked. Rissa studied her readings. "Energy fluctuations consistent with minimal life support. Atmosphere present but thin. No movement detected. But she frowned. There are shadows in the sensor data, areas that don't register properly. Soul residue, Nira supplied grimly. The aftermath of harvesting. Alaric nodded. We proceed as planned. Tovan, Rissa, suit up. Full environmental protection and the soul sigils. We go in, find the command center, extract what data we can, and get out. Quick and clean. 20 minutes later, the three of them stood in the Vanguard's airlock. Tovan and Rissa wore the environmental suits typical of deep space exploration, enhanced with Tovan's alchemical modifications. Alaric had opted for his battle armor, lighter, more maneuverable, and infused with protective enchantments forged during his time with Varen's unit. Tovan pressed a small, glowing disc into Alaric's palm. The soul sigil. It attaches directly over the heart. He demonstrated on his own suit, the disc seemingly melding with the material. Once activated, it creates a barrier that should, in theory, prevent soul extraction. But Alaric? He hesitated. It's experimental. And it's not designed for prolonged exposure. How long? Alaric asked, placing the disc over his heart. He felt a momentary warmth as it bonded with his armor. 3 hours at most before the barrier begins to degrade. After that, Tovan shrugged. Best not to find out. Noted. Alaric checked his weapons, the sight dagger at his hip and a more conventional energy pistol holstered at his thigh. Rissa, the protective enchantments? The light mage held up her hands, which glowed with gentle radiance. I'll establish a connected field once we're aboard. It won't stop direct attacks, but it should alert us to any malevolent energies. Nira's voice came through their communication devices. I've docked us at the airlock. Minimal contact point, easy to disengage if necessary. 15-minute check-ins. Remember. Understood. Alaric took a deep breath, centering himself as he had before countless missions. Let's move. The airlock cycled open, revealing a short, flexible tunnel connecting their ship to the harvester. They moved through it quickly, Alaric in the lead, until they reached the alien vessel's outer door. Tovan approached the control panel, studying its unfamiliar configuration. Not standard Imperial design, he muttered. Give me a moment. As the alchemist worked, Alaric studied the door itself. The metal, if it was truly metal, seemed to pulse slightly, as if breathing. Tiny veins of energy ran through its surface in patterns reminiscent of neural pathways. This ship is partially organic, he realized aloud. Or soul-infused. Rissa nodded grimly. The texts speak of this. Kalindra doesn't just harvest souls for power, she uses them as components. Construction materials. Before Alaric could respond to this disturbing confirmation, the door slid open with a sound like a sigh. Beyond lay darkness, broken only by faint, pulsing lights that lined what appeared to be a corridor. We're in, Alaric reported through the comm. First check-in clear, proceeding to locate the command center. Be careful. Nira's voice came back, tense with concern. Something about this feels wrong. It all feels wrong, Alaric thought but didn't say. Instead, he activated a light mounted on his armor and stepped through the doorway. The interior of the harvester defied conventional shipbuilding logic. The corridor curved in ways that seemed designed to disorient, its walls seamlessly transitioning between metal, transparent material that revealed the nebula outside, and sections that appeared almost flesh-like in texture. The pulsing lights followed no discernible pattern, sometimes clustering in dense constellations before spreading out into isolated points. Life support is functional, Tovan confirmed, checking a device on his wrist. Atmosphere thin but breathable, temperature low but within tolerance. Rissa moved her hands in a complex pattern, whispering words that seemed to bend around Alaric's ears. A subtle shimmer enveloped the three of them, her protective field manifesting. Stay close, she advised. The field has limited range. They advanced cautiously, each footstep producing strange, hollow echoes that seemed to propagate through the ship's structure rather than the air. Alaric led them deeper, following the corridor's twisted path, alert for any sign of threat or activity. After several minutes of cautious progress, the corridor opened into a larger chamber. Unlike the biological-mechanical hybrid nature of the corridor, this space was clearly designed for a specific purpose. Transparent cylinders lined the walls, each large enough to contain a human body. Most stood empty, but a few held misty, indistinct forms that swirled restlessly within their confines. Soul containment units, Rissa whispered, her face pale in the dim light. These are people. Tavon approached one of the occupied cylinders, scanning it with a device from his belt. Not exactly, not anymore. These are fragmentary essences, pieces of souls rather than complete entities. Kalindra's leftovers, Alaric said grimly. Parts she didn't consider worth harvesting completely. The realization struck him like a physical blow. These weren't failed experiments or disposable resources. These were the remnants of people Kalindra had deemed unworthy of complete consumption, souls torn apart with only fragments preserved, neither fully alive nor truly dead. Can they be freed? He asked, his voice tight. Rissa studied the containment system, her scholarly instincts temporarily overriding her horror. Possibly, but not here, not now. We would need specialized equipment, proper containment. Without bodies to return to, they would need surrogate vessels. We should document this, Tovan suggested. Gather evidence for the council, prove what Kalindra's been doing. Alaric almost laughed at the naivety of the suggestion. The council knows. They've always known. They just deemed the cost of confronting her too high. He shook his head. Let's find the command center. We'll come back for them if we can. They moved on, passing through 2 more chambers of similar design before reaching what appeared to be the central hub of the vessel. Unlike the biological corridors, this space was all hard angles and technological precision. A semicircular bank of control stations faced a large view screen that currently displayed only static. Suspended above the central console was a slowly rotating hologram of what appeared to be a star map. Tovan immediately moved to the controls. This I can work with. Standard navigation interface, modified but recognizable. How long? Alaric asked, keeping his attention on the various entrances to the chamber. 10 minutes to access, another 10 to extract anything useful. The alchemist's fingers were already dancing across the console, his mechanical arm occasionally extending tools to interface with unfamiliar components. Rissa had moved to a different section, where rows of crystal data storage units glowed with faint internal light. These contain records, she announced. Research data, judging by the classification markers. Kalindra's experiments. Copy what you can, Alaric instructed. Focus on anything related to the Great Soul Book or the Thousand-Star Temple. As his companions worked, Alaric conducted a methodical sweep of the chamber's perimeter. The ship remained eerily silent except for the occasional distant sound like a heartbeat, slow, irregular, but unmistakable. Despite the apparent dormancy of the vessel, he couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Alaric, Rissa called softly. I found something you should see. He joined her at the crystal array. She had activated a holographic display that projected images and text in a script that seemed to shift between recognizable characters and incomprehensible symbols. I can only translate portions, she explained. But this appears to be a log of Kalindra's early research, before the Dark Era began. She manipulated the display, highlighting sections. She was investigating soul energy as a healing modality, specifically for treating victims of void exposure. Void exposure, the mind-shattering result of unprotected contact with the raw chaos between dimensions. It had been a significant risk for early multiverse explorers, leaving survivors technically alive but with shattered psyches. She began with voluntary participants. Rissa continued, her voice troubled. Explorers already damaged beyond conventional treatment. But then, she scrolled to another section. She discovered that certain souls had greater regenerative capabilities, heroes, leaders, those with exceptional will or talent. So she started harvesting them, Alaric concluded grimly. Not immediately. Rissa pointed to another passage. First, she experimented with her own soul, attempting to fragment and regenerate it. The results were catastrophic. That's when her research changed direction. When she created the book, Alaric stared at the shifting text, a cold realization forming. She damaged herself, fractured her own soul in pursuit of knowledge. Yes, and in trying to repair it, she discovered that absorbing others' souls could temporarily fill the gaps in her own. Rissa looked up at him, her eyes troubled. She's not just collecting power, Alaric. She's trying to fix herself. Before he could process the implications, Tovan called from the navigation console. I've got it, coordinates for the Thousand-Star Temple, encrypted but accessible. His triumphant smile faded as he studied the data more closely. According to this, she's already there, has been for 3 days. Alaric's blood ran cold. We're too late. Not necessarily, Tovan countered. The ritual requires specific celestial alignments. According to these calculations, the optimal configuration occurs. He checked his chronometer. 52 hours from now. Then we still have time. Alaric decided, download everything. We leave in 5 minutes. As if in response to his declaration, the ship shuddered. The lights, both the artificial illumination and the strange, organic pulses, flickered momentarily. Then, from somewhere deep within the vessel came a sound like an indrawn breath, massive and hungry. It's waking up, Rissa whispered, her protective field visibly intensifying around them. Tovan, Alaric prompted tensely. Almost there, the alchemist replied, his mechanical arm whirring as it interfaced directly with the console. 30 more seconds. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. The walls of the command center seemed to flex inward, as if the vessel itself were contracting around them. From the corridors came new sounds, slithering movements and soft, rhythmic pulses. We have company, Alaric warned, drawing his energy pistol. Rissa, strengthen the field. Tovan, finish it now. Done. The alchemist disconnected from the console, clutching a small data crystal. Complete navigational data and research logs. Move, Alaric ordered. Back the way we came, quick and quiet. They retraced their steps through the twisted corridors, which now seemed even more maze-like than before. The organic sections of wall pulsed more rapidly, veins of energy glowing brighter with each passing moment. The ship was awakening around them, becoming aware of their presence. As they approached the chamber of soul containment units, Alaric held up his hand, signaling a halt. Ahead, moving between the transparent cylinders, was a figure unlike anything he had encountered before. Humanoid in basic shape, but wrong in every detail. Its body appeared composed of translucent material through which swirled what could only be described as captured souls. Hundreds of them. Their faces occasionally pressing against the surface of the creature's skin in silent screams. Soul Warden, Rissa breathed, her voice barely audible. The texts mention them, constructs created to manage the harvested souls. The creature hadn't noticed them yet. It moved methodically from cylinder to cylinder, its limbs occasionally elongating impossibly to adjust controls or examine the containment fields. Options? Alaric whispered. Tovan pointed to a secondary corridor branching off to their right. Alternative route, longer but might bypass the chamber entirely. Alaric nodded. They began to edge toward the alternate path when Rissa's foot caught on an uneven section of flooring. She stumbled slightly, catching herself quickly. But the sound, slight as it was, echoed in the chamber's perfect stillness. The Soul Warden froze, then slowly turned toward them. It had no visible eyes, yet Alaric felt the weight of its attention like a physical force. For a moment, no one moved. Then the creature opened what passed for its mouth, revealing not teeth, but a swirling vortex of energy that began to pull at the air around it. Run! Alaric commanded, shoving his companions toward the alternate corridor. As they bolted, he raised his energy pistol and fired a series of rapid shots at the creature. The energy blasts passed through the warden's translucent form with minimal effect, but they succeeded in momentarily disrupting its feeding vortex. The creature emitted a sound like thousands of whispers overlapping and began to move toward Alaric with surprising speed. He backed away, continuing to fire, buying time for Rissa and Tovan to reach the corridor. As the warden closed the distance, Alaric holstered his ineffective pistol and drew the sight dagger, its blade glowing with inner light. "Come then," he challenged, settling into a combat stance. "Let's see what you're really made of." The warden lunged, its form stretching and twisting in ways that defied physical laws. Alaric dodged the initial attack, slashing with the dagger as the creature passed. Unlike the energy pistol, the enchanted blade connected with substance, drawing a keening wail from the warden as a section of its arm separated and dissolved into mist. Emboldened, Alaric pressed his advantage, weaving through the creature's increasingly frantic attacks. The sight dagger sliced through the warden's form repeatedly, each cut releasing small, glowing motes that Alaric realized with horror were fragments of captured souls. The creature's attacks grew more desperate as more of its substance dissipated. It opened its vortex mouth again, this time directing the pull specifically at Alaric. He felt the tug at his essence, a cold sensation that reached beyond his physical form to grasp at something deeper. The soul sigil over his heart flared with protective energy, but he could feel the strain as the warden's pull intensified. Warning bells rang in his mind. This was exactly the kind of attack Tovan had cautioned the sigil might not withstand for long. Gritting his teeth against the sensation of being unraveled from within, Alaric gathered his strength for a final, decisive strike. He charged forward, directly into the pulling vortex, and thrust the sight dagger into the center of the warden's mouth-like opening. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The creature convulsed, its form rippling with conflicting energies. The vortex collapsed in on itself, and the warden's body began to disintegrate rapidly, releasing a cloud of soul fragments that swirled around the chamber like luminescent snow. Alaric staggered back, his strength momentarily depleted. The soul sigil still glowed, but its light had dimmed noticeably. He needed to move, to rejoin his companions before more wardens appeared. But something about the swirling soul fragments held him transfixed. They were beautiful in their freedom, these tiny pieces of once whole beings. As he watched, they began to coalesce, forming temporary patterns that almost resembled faces before dissolving again into new configurations. One pattern in particular formed and reformed repeatedly, a face that tugged at Alaric's fragmented memories. A face he almost recognized. "Alaric!" Rissa's urgent call broke his trance. She had returned to the chamber entrance, her protective field extended toward him. "We have to move. The ship is fully awakening." He tore his gaze from the hypnotic soul dance and ran to join her. Together they hurried down the alternate corridor, which twisted even more severely than the main passage. Tovan waited for them at an intersection, consulting a crude map he'd constructed from the ship's data. "This way," he directed, pointing to a narrower passage. "It should connect back to the airlock corridor eventually." As they navigated the labyrinthine interior of the Harvester, the vessel's awakening became increasingly evident. The walls pulsed faster, almost frantically. Sections of corridor behind them sealed themselves off, while new openings appeared ahead, as if the ship were attempting to herd them in a specific direction. "It's manipulating our path," Alaric realized. "Tovan, are you certain of our route?" The alchemist's expression was grim. "Not anymore. The internal configuration is shifting. I'm trying to maintain a general direction toward the outer hull, but..." "We're being guided," Rissa concluded. "Question is, toward what?" They had no choice but to continue forward, each turn taking them deeper into the awakened vessel. The organic elements of the ship grew more pronounced. Entire sections of corridor now resembled arterial passages, pulsing with energy that flowed like blood through veins. Finally, they emerged into a chamber unlike any they had seen before. Spherical in shape, its walls were entirely transparent, providing a panoramic view of the Crimson Nebula outside. In the center of the chamber floated a construct that resembled a throne, composed of the same translucent material as the Soul Warden, but far more intricate in design. Seated upon it was nothing, empty space. Yet the throne was clearly designed for occupancy, its contours shaped to accommodate a humanoid form. "What is this place?" Alaric asked, his voice hushed. Rissa moved slowly around the perimeter of the chamber, her scholarly curiosity momentarily overriding caution. "I believe it's a remote viewing station, a place where Kalindra could project her consciousness to control the Harvester from a distance." Tavan examined the throne with professional interest. Fascinating design. The crystalline structure appears capable of amplifying psychic energy across vast distances. He glanced at his chronometer. "We're overdue for check-in with Neri. The ship's hull must be interfering with our communications." Alaric approached the throne cautiously, the sight dagger still drawn. Something about the empty seat pulled at him, a familiar sensation he couldn't quite place. As he drew closer, the transparent material began to glow faintly, responding to his presence. "Alaric, don't," Rissa warned, sensing his intent. "We don't know what it might do to you." He hesitated, then stepped back. "You're right. We need to find our way back to the airlock. The ship is fully awake now. More wardens will be searching for us." As if summoned by his words, a soft, slithering sound came from one of the chamber's entrances. They turned to see not one, but 3 soul wardens gliding into the space, their translucent forms rippling with the faces of captured souls. "Other exit," Alaric directed tersely, backing toward the opposite side of the chamber. But before they could reach it, 2 more wardens appeared, blocking their escape. They were surrounded. Tovan's mechanical arm reconfigured itself, revealing a built-in weapon system. "I count 5. Odds could be worse." "Could be better." 2. Alaric muttered, positioning himself to protect his companions. "Rissa, can you expand the protective field?" The light mage's hands were already moving in complex patterns. "Yes, but it will thin correspondingly. It might not withstand direct soul extraction attempts for long." The wardens advanced slowly, moving with eerie coordination to tighten their circle around the intruders. Unlike the one Alaric had fought earlier, these seemed more cautious, assessing their prey before attacking. "When I give the signal," Alaric said quietly, "we move as one toward that exit." He nodded toward a gap between 2 of the wardens. "Tovan, lead with suppressing fire. Rissa, focus the field in our direction of travel. I'll handle anything that gets too close." His companions nodded, tensing for action. The wardens continued their measured approach, now close enough that Alaric could feel the cold emanating from their unnatural forms. "Now," he shouted. Tovan's arm weapon discharged a spread of alchemical projectiles that detonated in bright flashes upon contact with the wardens. The creatures recoiled from the light, their forms momentarily destabilizing. Rissa's protective field surged forward like a wave, pushing back the nearest warden as the 3 companions charged toward the gap in the encirclement. For a moment, it seemed they might break through. Then one of the wardens recovered faster than expected, its form elongating impossibly to block their path. Another launched itself directly at Rissa, its feeding vortex open and pulling. Alaric intercepted the attack, slashing with the sight dagger and severing a portion of the creature's form. But the defensive move cost him momentum, and in that crucial pause, the remaining wardens closed in. "The throne!" Tovan shouted suddenly. "It's a control nexus. If one of us can access it..." "I'll do it," Alaric decided instantly. "You 2 keep them occupied." Before his companions could object, he reversed direction, charging back toward the center of the chamber. 2 wardens moved to intercept him, but Tovan's well-aimed shots forced them to dodge, creating just enough space for Alaric to slip through. He reached the throne and, without allowing himself to hesitate, sat upon it. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The transparent material of the throne enveloped him like a second skin, merging with his armor. Information flooded his consciousness, sensor data from throughout the ship, the status of various systems, the location of every soul fragment contained within the vessel's holds. And with that information came control, He could feel the ship responding to his thoughts, recognizing him as an authorized user. How was that possible? Unless Rissa had been right. Unless he had known Kalindra before. Unless he had sat in this very throne once before. In those missing years. The revelation was disturbing, but he had no time to dwell on it. Focusing his will, he issued a silent command. Stand down, disengage, return to dormancy. The Soul Wardens froze in mid-attack, their forms suddenly rigid. One by one, they began to dissolve, returning to the misty state from which they had coalesced. Throughout the ship, Alaric could sense similar entities deactivating, systems powering down, the frantic pulse of energy slowing to a more measured rhythm. Alaric, Risa approached cautiously, her protective field still active. Are you all right? He found it difficult to focus on her voice, so immersed was he in the ship's systems. With effort, he directed his attention outward again. I'm in control. For now. The ship. It recognizes me. Tovan examined the throne's interaction with Alaric's body, his scientific curiosity evident. Fascinating. The interface appears to be keying off specific neural patterns, but that would mean that I've used it before. Alaric finished. Yes. He closed his eyes, focusing on extracting relevant information from the flood of data. I can access the ship's memory core. There are records, logs of previous operations. Images flashed through his mind, planets visited, souls harvested, experiments conducted. And throughout it all, two constants. Kalindra. Her face younger and unmarked by the signs of soul fracturing that now characterized her appearance. And beside her, always at her side. Himself. I was her protector, he whispered, the revelation hitting him like a physical blow. Her partner. Before whatever happened to change her. To change us both. Rissa and Tovan exchanged concerned glances. Alaric, Rissa said gently, we need to go. The ship may be dormant now, but if it's transmitting, it could alert Kalindra to our presence. She was right, of course. Yet the throne's connection offered answers to questions that had haunted him for years. The temptation to delve deeper, to recover all that he had lost, was almost overwhelming. With tremendous effort of will, he issued one final command to the ship's systems. Erase all records of our presence. Resume dormant state. Disable all communications for 24 hours. Then he forced himself to disconnect, pushing away from the throne as its material retracted from his form. The separation was like tearing off a part of himself, leaving him gasping and disoriented. Tovan caught him as he stumbled. Easy. That kind of neural interface takes a toll. Alaric steadied himself, his mind still reeling from what he had discovered. I know the way out, he said, his voice hoarse. And I know where Kalindra is going. What she plans to do. Tell us on the ship, Rissa urged. We need to leave before something else awakens. He nodded, leading them through corridors that now lay dormant. The pulsing lights dimmed to a faint glow. They reached the airlock without further incident, finding the connection to the Vanguard still intact. As they cycled through, Nira's voice came through their comms, tense with worry. Where have you been? I was about to come in after you. We're fine, Alaric assured her. Disconnect from the harvester. Get us moving as soon as we're aboard. Minutes later, they were safely back on the Vanguard, the harvester receding behind them as Tovan guided them deeper into the nebula. In the ship's small common area, Alaric sat heavily, still processing the revelations from the throne. Nira studied him with sharp eyes. What happened in there? You look like you've seen a ghost. In a manner of speaking, I did. Alaric looked up at his companions. I remembered, not everything, but enough. I was with her. Before, when she started her research, I helped her. Silence greeted this confession. Then Rissa asked softly, What changed? Alaric shook his head. I don't know. There's still so much missing. but I saw enough to understand what she's planning now. He leaned forward, his expression grave. The Thousand-Star Temple isn't just a location, it's a nexus point where multiple realities converge. With the Great Soul Book and the power she's harvested, Kalindra plans to rewrite the fabric of reality itself. To what end? Tovan asked. To undo her mistake, to recover what she lost when she fractured her own soul. Alaric's hands clenched into fists. But the cost will be catastrophic. Millions, perhaps billions of souls throughout the multiverse, consumed to fuel her reconstruction. Nira's expression hardened. Then we stop her, no matter what you once were to each other. Alaric met her gaze, his resolve solidifying. Yes, we stop her. He turned to Tovan. Set course for the death abyss. We need to reach the temple before the alignment reaches its peak. As the alchemist nodded and returned to the cockpit, Alaric felt a strange dual certainty. He would confront Kalindra, the cosmic witch who threatened all reality, and in doing so, he would finally face the truth of his own past, whatever that might be. The death abyss lived up to its name. As the astral vanguard approached its outer boundary, the vibrant crimson of the Sirin Nebula gave way to a darkness so absolute it seemed to devour light itself. Occasional flashes of energy, like distant, silent lightning, illuminated vast, swirling currents within the void. Soul storms, Rissa explained, standing beside Alaric at the viewport. The energy of disconnected souls interacting with the dimensional boundaries, beautiful, in their way, and terrible. Alaric watched the distant flashes, each one representing countless beings separated from their physical forms, some by natural death, others by violence or accident, and now, many by Kalindra's harvest. The pathways Tovan identified from the harvester's data, he asked. How confident are we in their stability? Rissa's expression was grave. Not very. The abyss is inherently unstable. The paths we've mapped represent the areas of least turbulence, but that's relative. We'll be navigating through a storm regardless. From the cockpit, Tovan called back. Approaching the entry point, everyone should secure themselves. This won't be a smooth transition. They moved to their positions, strapping into the acceleration couches that lined the Vanguard's main cabin. Nira checked her weapons one final time before securing them and herself. The Shadow Archer had been uncharacteristically quiet since Alaric's revelation about his past with Kalindra. Her expression guarded in a way it hadn't been before. Nira, Alaric said quietly, I understand if you have reservations now. Her sharp eyes fixed on him. About you? Or the mission? Either, both. She considered him for a long moment. My family is gone because of what Kalindra became. Nothing changes that. She secured the last strap across her chest. But I've watched you fight to stop her. I've seen what drives you. A ghost of her usual sardonic smile appeared. Besides, if you plan to betray us, you've had ample opportunity already. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but Alaric accepted it with a nod of acknowledgement. Trust was a luxury in their line of work, especially given what they now knew about his past. Entering the abyss in 3, 2, 1. Tovan's voice counted down from the cockpit. The Vanguard shuddered as it crossed the boundary between normal space and the anomalous region of the death abyss. Alaric felt a momentary sensation of vertigo, as if his inner ear and eyes couldn't agree on which way was up. Then came a pressure, subtle but unmistakable, against his very essence, the abyss testing the boundaries of his soul. Around them, the darkness deepened, broken only by the eerie, colorless lightning of the soul storms. The ship's external sensors struggled to provide meaningful data, with the view screens showing only vague, shifting patterns of energy rather than concrete features. Navigation switching to soul resonance mapping, Tovan announced, his voice tight with concentration. Conventional sensors are useless here. Soul resonance mapping, an experimental technology developed specifically for traversing regions like the abyss. It used the unique energy signature of living souls as reference points, creating a map not of physical space but of spiritual consonance and dissonance. The main view screen shifted, displaying what looked like flowing rivers of light cutting through the darkness, the pathways they needed to follow. Alaric knew the visualization was an artificial construct, the ship's computer translating incomprehensible data into something human minds could interpret and navigate. First junction approaching, Tovan called. "Hold tight, this is where it gets interesting." The Vanguard banked sharply, following one of the luminous paths as it curved through the void. Outside, the soul storms intensified, bolts of energy striking closer to the ship. Each impact sent ripples through the protective field Rissa had established around the vessel, the light mage maintaining a constant state of concentration to preserve their defenses. "How long until we reach the temple?" Alaric asked, bracing himself as another shudder ran through the ship. "At current speed, approximately 6 hours," Tovan replied. "Assuming the path remains stable, 6 hours through this nightmare realm." Alaric had endured worse, but not by much. The constant pressure against his soul was exhausting in a way physical exertion never could be, a deep weariness that seemed to reach into his very core. "We should rest in shifts," he decided. "Tovan needs to pilot, but the rest of us can rotate. 2 hours on, 4 off." Nira nodded agreement. "I'll take first watch with Tovan, you and Rissa recharge." Despite his instinct to protest, Alaric recognized the wisdom in the suggestion. The confrontation ahead would demand everything they had, and fatigue would only make them vulnerable. He unfastened his restraints and moved to one of the small sleeping compartments adjacent to the main cabin. Sleep came with surprising ease, perhaps a testament to his exhaustion. But with sleep came dreams, or perhaps more accurately, memories. Fragmented, disjointed images from his past. Kalindra as she had been before, her face unlined by the strain of soul fracturing, her eyes bright with purpose rather than madness. The two of them working together, exploring ancient sites of power throughout the multiverse, seeking knowledge that had been lost for millennia. In one particularly vivid sequence, he saw himself standing beside her in a chamber that could only have been the Thousand-Star Temple in an earlier time. Its vast dome intact, its central altar unscarred by whatever catastrophe had later damaged it. Kalindra was speaking, her words inaudible in the dream, but her expression earnest, passionate. He saw himself nodding in agreement, his younger face untroubled by the doubts and regrets that now weighed upon him. What had they been planning? What discovery or ambition had set them on the path that eventually divided them? The dream shifted, fragmenting further. Flashes of conflict, not between himself and Kalindra, but against others. Defenders of some sort, attempting to prevent them from accessing something of great value. He saw himself fighting with practiced efficiency, his skills already honed to deadly precision. Not a defender of justice then, but something else. Something darker. Then came the pivotal moment. Kalindra, standing before a swirling vortex of energy. The prototype of what would later become the Great Soul Book open in her hands. Her expression changed from triumph to shock to agony as the energy surged. Not into the book as intended, but into her soul, visible for a terrible instant as a luminous silhouette within her body, splintered like glass struck by a hammer. And he saw himself rushing toward her, reaching out. Alaric awoke with a gasp, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature of the sleeping compartment. The dream, the memory, had felt so real, so immediate. He could almost feel the residual shock in his limbs, the desperate need to reach her, to save her from what she had unleashed. A soft knock at the compartment door preceded Rissa's voice. "Alaric, your shift starts in 10 minutes. He took a moment to compose himself before responding. "I'll be right there." When he emerged into the main cabin, he found the situation largely unchanged. The Vanguard continued to navigate the treacherous currents of the abyss, the view screens still displaying the artificial pathways of light through darkness. Tovan remained at the controls, his mechanical arm now directly interfaced with the ship's systems for more precise navigation. Rissa studied Alaric's face with concern. "You look troubled," Did you rest at all? Some, he admitted, but I remembered more, about before. Interest sparked in her scholarly eyes. What did you see? The accident, the moment Kalindra damaged her soul. He ran a hand through his hair, still damp with sweat. We were at the temple, searching for something. She found it, tried to harness it. But something went wrong. The energy backfired, fractured her soul instead of being contained by the book. Rissa absorbed this, her brow furrowed in thought. That explains much. The texts I studied suggested the book was originally created as a repository for knowledge, not souls. She must have modified its purpose after her accident, seeking a way to repair the damage. By consuming the souls of others, Alaric concluded grimly, starting with the most powerful she could find, heroes, leaders, those with the strongest will. A desperate solution, Rissa acknowledged, but not an excuse for the harm she's caused. No, Alaric agreed. Not an excuse. He moved to the viewport, watching the distant flashes of the soul storms. But perhaps an explanation, and maybe a vulnerability we can exploit. Before Rissa could respond, the ship lurched violently, alarms blaring throughout the cabin. Tovan's voice rang out, tense but controlled. Soul storm intensifying, major disruption ahead. Alaric rushed to the cockpit, bracing himself against the bulkhead as the Vanguard pitched and rolled. The view screen showed their carefully plotted course dissolving, the luminous pathways fragmenting under the assault of massive energy discharges. Options? He demanded, strapping himself into the co-pilot's seat. Tovan's hands flew over the controls, his mechanical arm still interfaced with the ship's core systems. Limited. The storm is blocking all forward routes. We can retreat to safer territory and wait it out. Or, he hesitated. Or, Alaric prompted. Or we go through it. The alchemist glanced at him, the glow of the control panels reflecting off his determined face. It's risky. Soul storms can damage more than just the ship. They can affect the crew directly, especially in a vessel with our minimal shielding. Nira appeared in the cockpit doorway, her body tense with readiness. How long to wait it out? Tovan consulted the soul resonance maps. Based on current patterns, at least 12 hours before it dissipates enough for safe passage. Too long. Alaric decided immediately. The alignment at the temple happens in less than 24 hours. We need to reach Kalindra before she completes her preparations. He studied the chaotic energy patterns ahead. Can the ship withstand passage through the storm? Structurally, yes, with some damage likely. But again, the greater concern is the effect on us. Tovan's expression was grave. Soul storms can disrupt the connection between consciousness and essence. In extreme cases, they can even fragment the soul, not unlike what happened to Kalindra, though less severe. The irony wasn't lost on Alaric. So we risk becoming what we're trying to stop. Not exactly, Rissa interjected, having joined them in the cockpit. The protective field I've maintained can be modified, strengthened to shield our souls specifically rather than the ship as a whole. She held up her hands, which glowed with gentle luminescence. It will be taxing, but I believe I can maintain it through the storm. Alaric considered their options. Waiting meant certain failure. Kalindra would complete her ritual, and reality itself would suffer the consequences. Proceeding meant risking their souls, the very essence of their being. When framed that way, there was really no choice at all. Prepare for storm transit, he ordered. Rissa, establish your protective field. Tovan, plot the most direct course through. Nira. He turned to the Shadow Archer. Your abilities are derived from the void between dimensions. Can you assist Rissa in maintaining the field? Nira nodded, her expression solemn. My shadows can absorb some of the storm's energy, divert it from the shield. Not indefinitely, but perhaps long enough. Good. Alaric returned his attention to the view screen, where the soul storm raged with increasing intensity. Everyone secure yourselves. This will not be pleasant. As his companions prepared for the desperate gambit, Alaric found himself wondering if, somewhere in the storm's heart, fragments of Kalindra's original soul might still exist, torn away in that ancient accident and lost to the void. And if his own soul harbored similar wounds, invisible until now, but perhaps explaining the emptiness he had carried for so long. They were about to find out. The vanguard surged forward into the maelstrom, its engines straining against the chaotic currents of the soul storm. Within seconds, the artificial pathways on the view screen vanished completely, replaced by a blinding chaos of energy discharges. The ship bucked and rolled, protection systems struggling to compensate for forces they had never been designed to withstand. In the center of the main cabin, Risa knelt in a position of meditation, her hands weaving complex patterns as she maintained their soul shield. Around her, a dome of gentle light encompassed the entire crew, its surface rippling as external energy struck and dissipated against it. Beside her, Nira stood with arms outstretched, darkness flowing from her fingertips to create a secondary barrier that absorbed the most powerful discharges before they could reach Risa's shield. Alaric felt the pressure immediately, not physical, but something deeper, more fundamental. The storm pulled at his essence, testing the boundaries of his being. Each discharge that struck the ship sent resonant vibrations through his consciousness, like a tuning fork held against his soul. And with those vibrations came more fragments of memory, shaken loose by the storm's power. Kalindra, laughing as they discovered an ancient archive hidden beneath the ruins of a civilization lost to time. The two of them standing before the Council of Archmages, defending their unorthodox research methods. A quiet moment in a garden of floating crystals, discussing the nature of reality and their place within it. And then, the beginning of the change. Kalindra growing more obsessed with certain texts, ancient warnings about the price of power, the fragility of the soul, the possibility of transcendence through sacrifice. Hull integrity at 70%. Tovin reported through gritted teeth, his mechanical arm smoking slightly from the strain of maintaining connection with the overloaded systems. Navigational systems failing, flying blind. Alaric forced himself to focus through the disorienting flood of memories. Estimated time to storm's edge? Unknown. All mapping capabilities are offline. The alchemist hunched over the controls, making constant adjustments to keep them from being torn apart by the conflicting forces. I'm following instinct now more than instruments. In the center of the cabin, Risa's breathing had become labored, her protective field fluctuating as her strength waned. Nira's shadow barrier similarly showed signs of instability, portions disappearing momentarily before being re-established. We can't maintain this much longer, Nira warned, her voice tight with strain. Alaric moved to the center of the cabin, placing himself between his companions and the worst of the storm's fury. The sight dagger, still at his hip, had begun to glow with an inner light that responded to the chaotic energies around them. Acting on instinct, he drew the blade and held it aloft. The effect was immediate and unexpected. The dagger's glow intensified, forming a cone of stability that extended outward through the storm. Within that cone, the chaotic energies calmed, organizing into more predictable patterns. Tovan, Alaric called, follow the path the dagger is creating. The alchemist adjusted course immediately, guiding the vanguard into the zone of relative stability. The ship's violent movements eased somewhat, though the storm continued to rage all around them. What is that thing? Nira demanded, eyeing the dagger with new respect. A tool for seeing truth, Alaric replied, maintaining his position with effort. For piercing deception and illusion, I never realized it could affect reality itself. All perception affects reality. Risa managed through her concentration, especially here, where the boundaries between thought and substance are thinner. As they pressed forward, the memories continued to bombard Alaric's consciousness, filling in the gaps of his past. He saw the gradual deterioration of his relationship with Kalindra as her methods grew more extreme, her hunger for knowledge transforming into something darker. He witnessed their final confrontation before her accident, his plea for restraint met with dismissal, even contempt. And then, most disturbing of all, he saw the aftermath. Kalindra. changed by her fragmented soul, turning on him with newfound power. The battle that ensued, and his defeat, not physical, but something worse. She had used the prototype soul book on him, extracting not his entire soul but specific portions, memories, connections, the very knowledge of who he had been and what they had meant to each other. A punishment more cruel than death, a sentence to exist as a fragment of himself, haunted by emptiness he could neither understand nor fill. The realization hit him with such force that he nearly dropped the dagger. Kalindra hadn't just been his ally or partner, she had been more. And in her transformed state, she had taken that knowledge from him, leaving only the hollow shell of purpose that had driven him since. Alaric! Tovan's urgent call pulled him back to the present. I think I see something ahead, a boundary or barrier of some kind. Forcing his focus back to their immediate situation, Alaric saw what the alchemist had identified. A different quality to the chaos ahead. A pattern suggesting transition rather than continuation. The storm's edge, he confirmed. Push through, maximum power. The vanguard surged forward, its engines screaming in protest. For several heart-stopping moments, the resistance increased, as if the storm itself were attempting to hold them within its grasp. Then, with a final, violent shudder, they broke free. The abrupt transition from chaos to relative calm was shocking. One moment they were surrounded by the storm's fury, the next, they drifted in a region of space that, while still part of the death abyss, lacked the storm's destructive intensity. Rissa collapsed, her protective field dissolving as her strength gave out. Alaric rushed to her side, cradling her head as Nira produced a vial of restorative elixir from her belt. Just exhaustion, the light mage murmured as the elixir's effects began to take hold. I'll recover. Ship status, Alaric called to Tovan. The alchemist's assessment was grim, but not hopeless. Hull integrity at 62%. Engines strained, but functional. Life support intact. His mechanical arm emitted a series of sparks before he disconnected it from the ship's systems. Navigation is coming back online now that we're clear of the storm's interference, and... He paused, studying the readouts with surprise. We're closer to the temple than I expected. The storm actually propelled us forward. We'll reach the coordinates in less than 3 hours. Alaric helped Rissa to a recovery couch, his mind still reeling from the revelations the storm had shaken loose. His memories weren't complete. Perhaps they never would be. But he now understood enough to know what awaited him at the Thousand-Star Temple. Not just a confrontation with the cosmic witch, but a reckoning with his own past. Rest, he told Rissa gently. All of you should rest. I'll take the helm. Nira studied him with penetrating eyes. You remembered something else, something important. He met her gaze without flinching. Yes, Kalindra and I, we were more than colleagues. And when her soul fractured, when she changed, she didn't just leave me behind. She took pieces of me with her. Memories, connections. She used the book on you. Rissa realized, her scholarly mind making the connection despite her exhaustion. Alaric nodded. Not to take my entire soul, but to extract specific parts, to ensure I wouldn't remember what we had been to each other. A punishment, I think, for trying to stop her. Tovan's expression was troubled. And now you're remembering, the storm must have disrupted whatever blocks she placed in your mind. Which means she'll sense it when we meet. Alaric concluded. She'll know I've recovered what she took. Does it change anything? Nira asked bluntly. Our mission? Our plan? Alaric considered the question carefully. Did it change things? Knowing that he had once loved the woman they now hunted? That part of his own soul might still reside within her book? No, he decided finally. It doesn't change what she's become or what she plans to do. If anything, it makes stopping her more imperative. No one should have the power to fragment souls, not even their own. His companion seemed satisfied with this answer, though he sensed a new wariness in their expressions. They were professionals, all of them, committed to their mission. But they were also human, with all the doubts and concerns that entailed. "Get some rest," he repeated. "I'll call you when we approach the temple." As they dispersed to tend to their needs and recover their strength, Alaric took his place at the helm. The view screen showed their path forward, still through the strange, light-devouring emptiness of the death abyss, but without the soul storm's chaotic fury. In the distance, barely visible, even with the ship's enhanced sensors, a structure began to take shape. The Thousand-Star Temple, or what remained of it. Once, according to the fragmented histories Rissa had uncovered, it had been the center of a thriving civilization that spanned multiple dimensions. A nexus point where realities converged, allowing travel and communication between worlds that otherwise would never have connected. But something had happened, a catastrophe recorded only in myth and legend, that had destroyed that civilization and damaged the temple itself. Now it drifted in the void, a broken monument to lost possibilities, and Kalindra sought to harness its remaining power for her own purposes. As the vanguard continued its approach, Alaric found his thoughts turning to the confrontation ahead. If Kalindra sensed his recovered memories, how would she react? With anger, remorse, or would the fractured being she had become even care about their shared past? And what of his own feelings? He had spent years hunting her, driven by a sense of justice and vengeance that had consumed his existence. Now, understanding the full context of their connection, could he do what might be necessary to stop her? The sight dagger hummed softly at his hip, as if responding to his troubled thoughts. It sees truth, he reminded himself, and the truth was that Kalindra, whatever she had once been, now threatened the very fabric of reality with her desperate quest to repair her shattered soul. Whatever the cost to himself, to his heart or his own fractured soul, he would stop her. He had to. The Thousand-Star Temple emerged from the darkness like a dream, manifesting in physical form. Its once perfect dome was now cracked and incomplete, with sections missing entirely to reveal the dimensional anomalies that swirled within. What remained of its structure defied conventional architecture, angles intersecting in ways that seemed to bend space around them. The material itself, neither stone, nor metal, nor crystal, but something with qualities of all three, glowed with a faint inner light that pulsed in complex rhythms. "It's beautiful," Rissa whispered, having joined Alaric at the helm after her rest. "Even broken, it's beautiful." "And deadly," Nira added, her practical mind always focused on the threat at hand. "Sensors are detecting massive energy fluctuations. The alignment is already beginning." Tovan, his mechanical arm repaired and upgraded during their journey, studied the tactical display. No sign of other vessels nearby. Either Kalindra arrived well before us, or she never left. Alaric finished. The Harvester's data suggested she's been here for days, preparing for the alignment. He guided the Vanguard into a higher orbit around the temple, maintaining enough distance to avoid detection while they assessed the situation. The ship's enhanced sensors, now recovered from the storm's interference, provided detailed readings of the temple's current state. The central chamber is still intact, Tovan reported, highlighting a section on the display. That's where the dimensional nexus would be located, and there's a definite power signature there, artificial, not part of the temple's original systems. Kalindra, Alaric confirmed, preparing the Great Soul Book for the alignment. "How do we approach?" Nira asked, already checking her weapons. The shadow bow thrummed with barely contained energy, responding to its wielder's focused intent. Alaric studied the temple's broken structure, his tactician's mind evaluating entry points and defensive positions. "We can't dock directly. Too exposed. We'll need to use the environmental suits to cross the void from a concealed position." "There." Rissa pointed to a section of the temple where the dome's fracture created a natural entry point. "That breach leads directly to the interior passages. According to the ancient texts, there should be a network of corridors connecting to the central chamber. Assuming the temple's internal structure hasn't been completely rearranged by whatever catastrophe damaged it," Tovan cautioned. "It's our best option," Alaric decided. "Tovan." Bring us around to this position. He indicated a point in space where a particularly large fragment of the temple's exterior provided cover from the central chamber. We'll secure the ship there and make our approach on suit thrusters. As Tovan adjusted their course, Alaric turned to his companions. This is our last chance to prepare. Once we enter the temple, we'll be in Kalindra's domain. She'll have had days to set defenses, to prepare for interruptions. What exactly are we facing? Nira asked. Beyond Kalindra herself, I mean. Alaric considered what he had seen in the recovered memories and what they had learned from the Harvester's data. Soul Wardens, almost certainly. Probably more advanced versions than what we encountered on the ship. And she may have other constructs, guardians created from harvested souls bound to serve her. What about the book? Rissa inquired. How do we counter its power? Here. Alaric touched the sight dagger at his hip. This blade can pierce illusions, reveal hidden truths. In theory, it might be able to disrupt the book's connection to the souls it has consumed. In theory, Tovan repeated skeptically. It's more than we had before. Alaric's voice hardened with resolve. The alignment peaks in approximately 3 hours. We need to reach Kalindra before then, whatever the risks. The vanguard settled into position behind the temple fragment, its engines powering down to minimal output to avoid detection. As his companions prepared the environmental suits and checked their equipment one final time, Alaric found himself drawn back to the viewport, studying the broken majesty of the temple. How different might things have been if he and Kalindra had never discovered this place, if they had chosen a different path in their quest for knowledge? The weight of consequence hung heavy on his shoulders, not just for what had happened, but for what might still occur if they failed. Ready, Nira announced, breaking his reverie. She stood in her environmental suit, the shadow bow secured across her back. Rissa and Tovan were similarly equipped, the light mage's hands already glowing with protective enchantments, while the alchemist made final adjustments to his mechanical arm. Alaric donned his own suit, a modified version that accommodated his battle armor beneath it. The sight dagger remained accessible at his hip, its presence a reassuring weight. Remember, he told them as they gathered in the airlock, our primary objective is to stop the ritual. If we can separate Kalindra from the book, we might be able to reason with her. But if not, he left the alternative unspoken. They all understood the stakes. The airlock cycled open, exposing them to the void. Using the suit thrusters with practiced precision, they launched themselves toward the breach in the temple's dome. The journey through open space was brief but perilous, with dimensional anomalies occasionally distorting the very fabric of reality around them. More than once, Rissa's hastily erected barriers were all that prevented them from being drawn into miniature rifts that opened and closed like hungry mouths in the void. They reached the breach without detection, passing through the jagged opening into what had once been a grand antechamber. Now it stood in ruins, its ornate architecture crumbling into a zero-gravity field of debris. Their suit lights illuminated fragments of what might have been murals or inscriptions, depicting beings of light interacting across multiple planes of existence. The original builders, Rissa whispered over the comm, her scholarly interest momentarily overriding their tactical situation. A civilization that understood the multiverse not as theory, but as lived reality. Focus, Alaric reminded her gently. Which way to the central chamber? The light mage consulted a small device she had programmed with information from the ancient texts. This passage, she indicated a corridor that, remarkably, remained mostly intact. It should lead to a processional approach to the central nexus. They moved cautiously through the temple's interior, their progress slowed by the need to navigate damaged sections and avoid areas where reality itself seemed unstable. Occasionally, they passed chambers that might once have housed wonders beyond imagination, now reduced to empty shells or collapsed entirely. As they drew closer to the temple's heart, evidence of Kalindra's presence became more apparent. The ambient energy changed, taking on the sickly luminescence characteristic of soul manipulation. Tendrils of power snaked along the walls like parasitic vines, pulsing with stolen life force. She's already channeling the harvested souls, Tovan observed, scanning the energy patterns with a device built into his mechanical arm, preparing them for the alignment. Alaric felt it, a pressure against his consciousness that grew stronger with each step toward the central chamber. And beneath that pressure, a painful familiarity. Part of him recognized this energy, resonated with it. The connection he and Kalindra had once shared, distorted now by her transformation, but not entirely destroyed. "There's something else," Nira said suddenly, her heightened senses detecting what the others had missed. Movement ahead, not human. They pressed themselves against the corridor walls as a patrol of soul wardens drifted past an intersection ahead. These constructs were indeed more advanced than those they had encountered on the Harvester, their translucent forms more defined, the captured soul fragments within them more thoroughly integrated into their structure. They moved with purpose rather than the mindless drifting of their ship-bound counterparts. "Guards!" Alaric whispered once the patrol had passed. "She knows the temple is vulnerable during the alignment. She'll have them positioned throughout the approach to the central chamber." "Can we avoid them?" Rissa asked. Alaric considered their options. Possibly, but it would mean taking a more circuitous route, and time is against us. He looked to Nira. "How many did you count in that patrol?" "3, the Shadow Archer replied. "But there will be more. We need to move quickly and directly." Alaric decided, "Nira, take point. Your shadows will be most effective against these constructs. Rissa, maintain the protective field around us. It might help mask our presence from their soul-sensing abilities. Tovan, be ready to neutralize any alarm systems we encounter." With nods of agreement, they adjusted their formation and continued forward. The corridor gradually widened, its architecture becoming grander even in its damaged state. Columns carved with symbols of dimensional transit lined their path, while overhead, the ceiling opened occasionally to reveal the swirling anomalies that had once been carefully controlled portals between realities. They encountered 2 more patrols, managing to avoid detection through a combination of Nira's shadow concealment and fortunate timing. But as they approached what appeared to be the final threshold before the central chamber, their luck ran out. A soul warden emerged suddenly from a side passage, its form solidifying directly in their path. Before they could react, it unleashed a silent alarm, not sound, but a pulse of soul energy that rippled outward through the temple's structure. "Cover blown," Nira announced tersely, her shadow bow already drawn and firing. The arrow passed through the warden's form, momentarily disrupting its cohesion, but not destroying it. "Fall back to that alcove," Alaric ordered, drawing both the sight dagger and his energy pistol. "Defensive position." They retreated to a recessed section of the corridor where damaged columns provided some cover. The soul warden advanced, now joined by others responding to its silent call. Alaric counted 5, then 7 of the constructs, their translucent forms filling the corridor with their cold, hungry presence. "Rissa, can you boost the protective field?" he asked, firing his energy pistol in controlled bursts to keep the wardens at bay. The light mage's hands glowed brighter as she intensified her efforts. "Yes, but not indefinitely. And it won't stop a coordinated assault." Tovan's mechanical arm reconfigured, revealing the weapon system he had used on the Harvester. "I've modified the alchemical charges. They should be more effective now that I've analyzed their composition." The alchemist unleashed a volley of bright projectiles that detonated among the advancing wardens. This time, the effect was more substantial. 2 of the constructs dissolved entirely, while others recoiled, their forms temporarily destabilized. Nira had scaled one of the damaged columns, gaining a higher vantage point from which her shadow arrows could strike with greater precision. Each shot targeted the core of a warden, where the soul fragments were most densely concentrated. Alaric engaged the nearest construct directly, the sight dagger slicing through its form with greater efficacy than any conventional weapon. As before, each cut released captured soul fragments, which swirled momentarily in freedom before dissipating into the temple's energy field. For several intense minutes, they held their position against the growing number of wardens. But Alaric knew they couldn't maintain this defense indefinitely, not with the alignment approaching and Kalindra's ritual already in progress. "We need to break through," he called to his companions. "Make for the central chamber entrance. I'll clear a path." Before they could protest, he charged forward, the sight dagger held before him like a beacon. The blade's inner light intensified, creating a zone of disruption that momentarily scattered the wardens in his path. Behind him, Tovin unleashed another volley of alchemical charges while Nira's arrows provided covering fire from above. Rissa maintained the protective field, moving with them as they pushed forward. They fought their way down the remainder of the corridor, the opposition growing thicker as they approached the central chamber. Soul wardens materialized from side passages, while other constructs, more solid, resembling armored guardians formed from the same translucent material, joined the defense. Finally, they reached a massive doorway that could only be the entrance to the temple's heart. Unlike much of the structure they had passed through, this portal remained largely intact, two towering slabs of the strange temple material, inscribed with symbols that shifted and changed as if alive. "It's sealed," Tovin announced, examining the door while the others maintained their defensive position. "Can you open it?" Alaric asked, dispatching another warden with a precise thrust of the dagger. The alchemist studied the mechanisms with professional interest despite the chaos around them. "Yes, but it will take time. These aren't conventional locks. They respond to specific soul resonances." "Time we don't have," Nira pointed out, her supply of shadow arrows visibly diminishing as she continued to hold back their attackers. Rissa approached the door, her hands moving in intricate patterns as she read the shifting inscriptions. "These are permission sigils. They're asking for identification, proof of authorization to enter during a dimensional alignment." "Can you falsify it?" Alaric asked. The light mage's expression was uncertain. "Perhaps, but it would require intimate knowledge of the temple's original protocols." As they debated, the pressure of the warden's assault increased. More of the constructs poured into the corridor, their cold hunger palpable even through Rissa's protective field. They were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Then Alaric remembered something from his recovered memories, a sequence he and Kalindra had discovered during their original exploration of the temple. A back door of sorts, left by the ancient builders for emergencies. "Step back," he told his companions, approaching the door with the sight dagger held high. With his free hand, he traced a complex pattern on the door's surface, following the memory's guidance. Then, at a specific point in the sequence, he pressed the dagger's tip against the center of the door. The effect was immediate. The shifting symbols froze, then realigned themselves into a new configuration. With a sound like a massive intake of breath, the doors began to part. "How did you—" Rissa began. "Later." Alaric cut her off, gesturing for them to move through the opening. "Get inside before more wardens arrive." They slipped through the partially open doors into the central chamber beyond. What greeted them stole the breath from their lungs. The chamber was vast, far larger than the temple's external dimensions should have allowed. Its circular floor descended in concentric tiers toward a central platform where reality itself seemed to bend and fold. Above, the damaged dome allowed glimpses of the void outside, while within, swirling currents of dimensional energy created a constantly shifting aurora of impossible colors. And there, on the central platform, stood Kalindra. Even at this distance, Alaric recognized her immediately. Her form was both familiar and alien, the basic physical features he remembered, but altered by her fragmented soul. Her skin bore luminous patterns that pulsed with stolen life force, while her eyes glowed with an inner light that was neither natural nor entirely sane. She wore robes that seemed woven from the same material as the temple itself, designs shifting across their surface as she moved. In her hands, she held the Great Soul Book, larger now than in his memories, its pages glowing with the essence of countless harvested heroes. As they watched, she turned another page, and energy surged from the book into the nexus point at the chamber's center, where a swirling vortex was gradually taking shape. The ritual has already begun. Rissa whispered, her scholarly assessment cutting through their momentary awe. She's using the book to stabilize the dimensional rifts, preparing them for the alignment. How long? Alaric asked, his voice tight. Tovan checked his chronometer. Alignment peaks in 27 minutes, but the preparatory phase. He studied the energy patterns in the chamber. That's nearly complete, maybe 5 minutes remaining. 5 minutes before Kalindra would be ready to harness the full power of the alignment. 5 minutes to traverse the chamber, overcome whatever defenses remained, and stop her. It wasn't enough time, not by conventional means. I need to reach her, Alaric decided, alone. Nira's eyes narrowed. That's suicide. No, it's strategy. He turned to face his companions directly. She'll be focused on me, on our connection. While I engage her, you three position yourselves around the chamber. Risa, identify the key points in the ritual where intervention would be most disruptive. Tovan, prepare your strongest alchemical countermeasures. Nira, find a vantage point where your arrows can target the book itself. And you? Tovan asked. Alaric's hand rested on the sight dagger. I'll confront her directly. Use our shared past to distract her. When I give the signal, hit her from all sides simultaneously. His companions exchanged concerned glances, but they recognized the logic in his plan. With time so short and their options limited, a coordinated strike while Kalindra was distracted offered their best chance of success. What's the signal? Nira asked practically. Alaric thought for a moment. When I raise the dagger toward the dome, you'll all have clear sight lines to me from wherever you position yourselves. With nods of understanding, they prepared to separate. But before they could, Alaric had one final instruction. If I fall, he said quietly, don't hesitate. Complete the mission. Stop the ritual at any cost. They acknowledged this grim directive with solemn nods. Then, with a final exchange of resolute glances, they moved out, Risa circling to the left, Tovan to the right, and Nira seeking higher ground among the chamber's architectural features. Alaric watched them go, then turned his attention back to the central platform where Kalindra continued her preparations. Drawing a deep breath to center himself, he began his approach. He descended the tiered levels of the chamber floor, making no attempt to conceal his presence. As he had anticipated, Kalindra sensed him almost immediately. Her head lifted from the book, her glowing eyes scanning the chamber until they found him. For a moment, she simply stared, her expression flickering through emotions too complex and alien to fully interpret. Then her lips curved in what might have been a smile or a grimace of pain. Alaric, she called, her voice carrying easily across the vast space. My hunter. My pursuer. A pause, heavy with implication. My betrayer. He continued his approach, stopping at the edge of the central platform. From this distance, perhaps 20 paces separating them, he could see the full extent of her transformation. The beautiful scholar he remembered had been replaced by something both more and less than human. Her soul's fracturing had left visible marks, fissures in her skin that glowed with the same energy as the book, eyes that seemed to see across dimensions rather than merely physical space. Kalindra, he acknowledged, his voice steady despite the tumult of emotions her presence evoked. This has gone far enough. She laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the chamber. Gone far enough. It has barely begun, my dear Alaric. Look around you. She gestured with one hand, indicating the swirling energies above and the forming vortex at her feet. The alignment approaches. When it peaks, I will finally have the power to repair what was broken, to make myself whole again. At what cost? He challenged. How many souls have you harvested to fuel this ritual? How many lives destroyed? Her expression hardened. You speak of cost? You, who abandoned me when my soul shattered, who tried to stop my research when you realized its full implications. I remember now, Alaric replied, taking another step forward. What you did to me, the memories you took. This gave her pause. Her eyes narrowed, studying him with new intensity. Impossible. Those fragments are here, in the book. She tapped its cover with one elongated finger. You cannot have recovered what I took. The death abyss has a way of shaking loose what's hidden, he told her. I remember enough. Kalindra. I remember us, before. What we were to each other. What we sought together. Something flickered across her face, a momentary softening, quickly suppressed. And yet here you stand, weapon in hand, come to stop me once again. She shook her head. Some things never change, it seems. It doesn't have to be this way, Alaric said, taking another cautious step onto the platform itself. From the corner of his eye, he could see his companions taking their positions, Rissa analyzing the energy flows, Tovan preparing his countermeasures, Nira finding her vantage point high among the chamber's broken architecture. Just a little longer, a little more distraction. We sought knowledge together once, he continued. We wanted to understand the multiverse, not reshape it to our will. Knowledge without application is meaningless, Kalindra replied, her attention still fixed on him though her hands continued their ritual gestures over the book. I learned that lesson when my soul shattered, when agony became my constant companion. I would have helped you, Alaric told her, and realized with surprise that he meant it. If you had let me. Her laugh was bitter now. Helped me? By stopping my research? By destroying the very tools I needed to save myself? She shook her head. No. Alaric. You chose your path when you tried to destroy the prototype book, when you placed abstract ethics above my suffering. The vortex at her feet grew more defined as she spoke, its swirling energies beginning to align with the dimensional currents flowing through the chamber. Alaric could feel the power building, resonating with something deep within himself, perhaps those fragments of his own soul that remained connected to her through the book. And what of the suffering you've caused? He challenged, buying more time as his companions completed their preparations. The heroes whose souls you've consumed, the empty shells left behind, does their agony mean nothing compared to yours? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her transformed features. They serve a greater purpose. Their essence will help repair the damage to the multiverse itself, damage caused when my soul fractured. This was new information, and despite the tactical situation, Alaric found himself genuinely curious. What do you mean? Kalindra gestured to the swirling anomalies visible through the broken dome. My accident didn't just damage me, Alaric. It created fracture points throughout reality, weaknesses in the dimensional boundaries. Left unchecked, they will eventually tear the multiverse apart. Her voice took on a fervent quality. I'm not just saving myself, I'm saving everything. The revelation staggered him. Could she be telling the truth? Had her soul's fracturing really caused damage on a multiversal scale? It seemed impossible, and yet, the increasing instability of the dimensional boundaries in recent years, the proliferation of anomalies like the death abyss. What if these weren't natural phenomena, but symptoms of a deeper problem? Even if that's true, he said, regaining his focus, consuming souls isn't the answer. There must be another way. I've spent years searching for one, she replied, her voice weary beneath its power. There isn't. The damage requires soul energy to repair, concentrated, powerful soul energy, the kind only found in exceptional beings. She met his gaze directly. In heroes, in leaders, in those with the will to shape reality through sheer force of character. Alaric was close enough now to see the details of the book in her hands, its cover made from material that seemed both organic and metallic. Pages that glowed with captured essence. So many souls, bound within its power, including, if she spoke truth, fragments of his own. He needed to signal his companions. The alignment was approaching its peak, the vortex nearly stabilized. But something held him back, the possibility, however small, that Kalindra's claims about the multiversal damage were accurate. If stopping her would doom reality itself. How can I believe you? He asked, playing for time while his mind raced through possibilities. After everything you've done? Her expression softened. Just slightly. You know me, Alaric. Better than anyone ever did. Whatever I took from your memories, your heart still knows the truth of who I am. She extended one hand toward him, palm up. Join me. Help me complete the ritual. Together. We can repair the damage. To me. To you. To the multiverse itself. For a heartbeat, he wavered. The sincerity in her voice, the connection he still felt despite everything, it pulled at him, tempting him with the possibility of reconciliation rather than conflict. Then his gaze fell on the book again, and he saw the faces pressed against its pages from within. Heroes consumed, their essences trapped in perpetual agony. Whatever Kalindra's intentions, whatever the truth about the multiversal damage, this was not the way. Could never be the way. His resolve hardened. He raised the sight dagger, not toward Kalindra, but toward the broken dome above, the signal his companions had been waiting for. I'm sorry, he told her, and meant it. But this ends now. Understanding dawned in her glowing eyes as she registered his intent. Alaric, no, you don't understand what you're doing. But it was too late. Around the chamber, his companions sprang into action with perfect coordination. Rissa unleashed a concentrated burst of light magic at the vortex, disrupting its carefully balanced energies. Tovan's alchemical charges detonated at key points around the chamber, sending shockwaves through the dimensional currents. And from above, Nira loosed a shadow arrow directly at the Great Soul Book in Kalindra's hands. Kalindra reacted with supernatural speed, raising a barrier of soul energy that deflected Nira's arrow and absorbed much of Rissa's magical assault. But Tovan's charges had the desired effect, destabilizing the chamber's energy flows and sending ripples of disruption through the forming vortex. No, Kalindra cried, genuine fear in her voice. The alignment is too close. Without proper containment, the energies will... She didn't finish the warning. The vortex, disrupted, but not destroyed, began to pulse erratically. Tendrils of dimensional energy lashed out randomly, slicing through the chamber's architecture and tearing new rifts in the already damaged structure. Alaric charged forward. The sight dagger aimed not at Kalindra herself, but at the book she clutched to her chest. If he could separate her from it, perhaps they could still contain the chaotic energies before catastrophe struck. She saw his intent and raised one hand. A blast of pure soul energy erupted from her palm, striking Alaric squarely in the chest. The soul sigil Tovan had given him flared brilliantly as it absorbed the attack, but the force still sent him staggering backward. You fool! Kalindra shouted over the rising cacophony of dimensional energies tearing through the chamber. You've doomed us all. The vortex continued to destabilize, its swirling form expanding and contracting in violent pulses. With each pulse, more rifts opened in the chamber walls, exposing glimpses of other realities, some familiar, others utterly alien. Alaric regained his footing and launched himself forward again, determined to reach the book. This time, he dodged Kalindra's energy blast, rolling beneath it and coming up within striking distance. The sight dagger flashed as he thrust it toward the book's cover. Kalindra twisted away, but not quickly enough. The dagger's edge caught the book's binding, slicing through material that should have been impervious to any conventional weapon. A keening wail rose from the damaged tome, and light erupted from the cut, soul energy beginning to escape its confines. Faces formed in the escaping light, heroes partially freed from their imprisonment. Their expressions reflected confusion, anger, and desperate hope as they struggled toward freedom. Among them, Alaric caught a glimpse of what might have been Commander Varen, his features already beginning to dissolve as his essence sought to return to its natural state. Kalindra clutched the damaged book tighter, trying to stem the flow of escaping souls. Stop! You don't understand what you're unleashing. But Alaric pressed his advantage, slashing again and again at the book with the sight dagger. Each cut released more captured souls, their combined energy adding to the chaos already sweeping through the chamber. Across the platform, Rissa had abandoned her attack on the vortex and was now attempting to contain the dimensional rifts, her hands weaving complex patterns of stabilizing magic. Tovan worked alongside her, his alchemical devices deployed to reinforce the weakening boundaries between realities. Nira continued to provide covering fire, her shadow arrows targeting soul wardens that had begun to materialize throughout the chamber in response to their mistress's distress. The situation was spiraling out of control. The vortex, now completely destabilized, had become a maelstrom of dimensional energy that threatened to tear the entire temple apart. Rifts opened and closed randomly throughout the chamber, some large enough to provide glimpses of entire alien landscapes beyond. And still, Alaric fought to separate Kalindra from the book. Their combat carried them around the central platform. Each magical attack she launched met with a counter-strike from the sight dagger. The weapon's power was revealed in full now, not just able to pierce illusions, but to cut through the very fabric of soul magic itself. Alaric! Tovan's urgent call cut through the chaos. The alignment, it's happening. Above them, visible through the broken dome, stars shifted position as the cosmic forces Kalindra had sought to harness reached their peak. Energy surged through the chamber, feeding into the destabilized vortex and causing it to expand dramatically. Kalindra saw it too. With a cry of desperation, she abandoned her fight with Alaric and turned her full attention to the book. Her hands moved in complex gestures as she attempted to complete the ritual, despite the damage and disruption. "I can still fix it," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the dimensional storm. "Still repair what was broken." Alaric realized her intent too late. As the alignment reached its apex, Kalindra thrust the damaged book directly into the heart of the vortex. Soul energy and dimensional power met in a cataclysmic surge that momentarily blinded everyone in the chamber. When Alaric's vision cleared, he beheld a sight both beautiful and terrifying. The vortex had stabilized, but not as originally intended. Instead of a controlled nexus point, it had become a swirling maelstrom of souls and dimensional energy, with Kalindra suspended at its center. The book was gone, its physical form apparently destroyed, but its power, and the souls it had contained, now orbited Kalindra like a living constellation. "What have you done?" Alaric shouted, bracing himself against the winds of power that emanated from the transformed vortex. Kalindra's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the chamber. "What I had to. The ritual is changed, but not stopped. Instead of repairing my soul through the book, I've become the vessel directly." Her form began to change, expanding and contracting as the stolen soul energy flowed into and through her. The fractures in her skin widened, revealing not blood and tissue, but pure dimensional energy beneath. "The multiversal damage can still be repaired," she continued, her voice taking on a chorus-like quality as other voices, the voices of consumed heroes, layered beneath her own. "But the cost has changed. Now, instead of them being consumed to heal me..." Horror dawned in Alaric's mind as he realized what she was saying. "You're sacrificing yourself to contain the damage." "Yes." The word echoed with 1,000 voices. "My fractured soul, combined with the essence I've gathered, will serve as the binding agent, a living seal on the dimensional wounds." Rissa had made her way to Alaric's side, her protective field barely holding against the power surging through the chamber. "She's telling the truth," the Light Mage confirmed, reading the energy patterns with her scholarly insight. "The rifts are beginning to stabilize. The multiversal bleeding is slowing." "But at what cost to her?" Alaric asked, unable to tear his gaze from Kalindra's transforming form. "Total," Tovan answered grimly, joining them. "Her consciousness, her individuality, everything that makes her Kalindra, will be dispersed across the dimensional boundaries, spread so thin it effectively ceases to exist as a unified entity." Nira arrived last, her shadow powers nearly depleted from the continuous battle. "So she saves reality by destroying herself? Convenient redemption." But Alaric heard the uncertainty in her voice. They all recognized the magnitude of the sacrifice being made before their eyes. Kalindra's form continued to expand, becoming less humanoid and more abstract, a living constellation of soul energy that pulsed in complex patterns. Her features were still barely discernible at the center of this cosmic display, her eyes finding Alaric's across the dimensional storm. I remember now. Her voice said, softer despite its multiple layers. Why I took those memories from you, not as punishment, but as mercy. A pause, heavy with emotion. I knew this might be necessary someday. Knew you would try to stop me, or worse, try to take my place. I couldn't bear either possibility. Alaric stepped forward, the sight dagger still in his hand, though he no longer raised it as a weapon. There must be another way. There isn't. Not anymore. Her voice was fading, becoming more diffuse as her form continued to spread outward. But there is something you can do, Alaric. Something only you can do. What? He asked, drawing closer despite the danger. The book is destroyed, but the souls, they're not free yet. They're bound to me now, caught in this transformation. Her dissolving features formed what might have been a smile. Your dagger, it can release them. Can sever the connections I've forged without disrupting the dimensional seal I'm becoming. Alaric understood immediately. You want me to use it on you. To cut away the souls you've harvested while leaving your essence to complete the binding. Yes. The word was barely a whisper now. A final act of mercy, my love, for them and for me. He hesitated, the dagger heavy in his hand. If I do this, will I get back what you took from me? My memories? A sound like distant laughter rippled through the swirling energy. Yes, but I warn you, not all memories are gifts. Some are burdens. Alaric looked to his companions, seeking guidance or objection. Riss's expression was solemn but resolute. She nodded once, confirming Kalindra's claim about the soul's predicament. Tovan's analytical mind had clearly reached the same conclusion, though regret showed clearly on his face. Even Nira, who had lost the most to Kalindra's harvesting, gave a tight nod of assent. With their silent support, Alaric turned back to the cosmic display that had once been Kalindra. He raised the sight dagger, its blade glowing with inner light that seemed to respond to the soul energy surrounding them. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for everything, for not finding another way. As am I, came the fading reply. Now, Alaric, while I still have enough of myself to guide you. Cut here. A pattern of light intensified within the swirling energy, indicating where the connections to the harvested souls were strongest. Alaric stepped forward, the dagger extended. With a single, precise movement, he slashed through the indicated pattern. The effect was immediate and breathtaking. The cosmic display around Kalindra's fading form erupted in a cascade of light as trapped souls broke free from their bonds. They streamed outward in all directions, some toward the rifts that would lead them back to their original realities, others dissipating into the temple's energy field to find their own paths home. Among them, Alaric caught glimpses of heroes he recognized. Commander Vareen, his essence finally freed, leaders and champions from worlds throughout the multiverse, ordinary people who had shown extraordinary courage when faced with darkness, all flowing outward in a spectacular exodus of liberated spirit. And as they departed, Kalindra's essence continued its transformation, spreading thinner and thinner as it formed a living barrier across the dimensional wounds. Her features, already barely discernible, faded further until only the faintest suggestion of her original form remained. Thank you, her voice whispered, now a single tone rather than the chorus it had been. Remember me as I was, not as what I became. Then, with a final pulse of energy that swept through the chamber like a gentle wave, she was gone, transformed entirely into the dimensional seal that would preserve the multiverse's integrity. Where the chaotic vortex had been, now stretched a beautiful, shifting aurora of energy that pulsed with a rhythm like a heartbeat. The temple shuddered, then began to stabilize. The random rifts that had torn through its structure sealed themselves as Kalindra's essence reinforced the boundaries between realities. The soul storms visible beyond the broken dome calmed, their chaotic energy patterns resolving into more ordered flows. And within Alaric's mind, locked memories began to return, flowing back into the spaces they had once occupied, filling the emptiness that had haunted him for so long. The full story of his relationship with Kalindra unfolded in his consciousness, their meeting, their growing connection, their shared ambitions and dreams. Their love, which had been deep and genuine before ambition and fear had corrupted it. The pain of these recovered memories struck him with physical force, driving him to his knees on the central platform. Not all memories were gifts indeed. Some were burdens, just as she had warned. His companions approached cautiously, unsure how to respond to what they had witnessed. Rissa knelt beside him, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "It's done," she said softly. "The dimensional wounds are healing. The souls are free." "And Kalindra?" Alaric asked, though he already knew the answer. "Gone," Tovan confirmed, his scientific detachment unable to entirely mask his emotion. Or perhaps more accurately, transformed. Her essence now forms the binding that holds the multiverse together. "A fitting end," Nira observed, her voice lacking its usual edge. "Creating rather than destroying, preserving rather than consuming." Alaric rose slowly to his feet, the sight dagger still in his hand, though its glow had dimmed now that its purpose was fulfilled. He looked around the chamber, at the stabilizing energy flows, at the aurora that had once been Kalindra, at the last few freed souls finding their paths home. "Not an end," he corrected quietly. "A transformation, a new beginning." As if in response to his words, a final pulse of energy emanated from the aurora. It washed over him, carrying a sensation that was unmistakably Kalindra, not as the cosmic witch she had become, but as the brilliant, passionate scholar she had once been, a farewell, and perhaps a blessing. Then it was gone, leaving only the gentle pulsing of the dimensional seal and the quiet hum of a temple slowly healing itself. "We should go," Tovan suggested after a respectful silence. "The temple will continue to repair, but it's not designed for prolonged human presence anymore." Alaric nodded, unable to find words as the full weight of recovered memories and recent events settled upon him. Together, they made their way back through the chamber and the corridors beyond, which now seemed more ordered, less damaged than during their approach. The soul wardens were gone. Their purpose ended with Kalindra's transformation. In their place, gentle motes of light guided their path back to the breach where they had entered. It was as if the temple itself was showing them the way out, acknowledging their role in its restoration. They reached the astral vanguard without incident, the ship undamaged despite the dimensional chaos that had briefly engulfed the temple. As Tovan prepared for departure, Alaric returned to the viewport for one final look at the structure that had been the culmination of so many fates. The thousand-star temple no longer appeared broken. Its dome, while still altered from its original form, had stabilized into a new configuration that seemed intentional rather than damaged. Through its transparent sections, the aurora of Kalindra's essence was visible, pulsing in that same heartbeat rhythm as it maintained the dimensional seal. "What will you do now?" Rissa asked, joining him at the viewport. "With your memories restored, your mission complete." Alaric considered the question as the vanguard disengaged from the temple fragment and began its journey back through the now calmed death abyss. What purpose remained for a knight whose quest had ended in such unexpected fashion? Whose enemy had become savior? Whose missing past had finally been returned, bringing as much pain as closure? "There are others," he said finally. "Others like Kalindra, who seek power regardless of cost, who would exploit the multiverse's vulnerabilities for their own gain." He turned to face his companions, the light mage, the alchemist, the shadow archer, allies who had become friends through shared danger and purpose. "And there are still heroes to protect, still justice to uphold." Nira smiled, her customary sardonic edge returning. "So we continue. Find new missions, new challenges. If you're willing." Alaric agreed, including all of them in his gaze. Tovan's mechanical arm whirred as he adjusted their course. "My research has barely begun. The alchemical possibilities we've encountered, they could revolutionize how we understand the intersection of science and soul energy. And the ancient texts still hold many secrets," Rissa added, her scholarly enthusiasm undimmed by their ordeal. especially regarding the temple's original builders and their understanding of dimensional travel. Their acceptance warmed something in Alaric that had been cold for too long. With his fractured memories restored, he could finally begin to heal, to integrate the person he had been with the person he had become. As the vanguard accelerated away from the temple, Alaric felt a curious lightness despite the weight of all he had learned and lost. Kalindra was gone. Yet, in a sense, she surrounded them all now, her essence part of the very fabric that held reality together. His soul, once partly empty due to her theft, now felt strangely complete. Not just because his memories had returned, but because he had helped transform her final act from one of desperate self-preservation to one of genuine sacrifice and creation. The sight dagger hummed softly at his hip, its purpose fulfilled, yet its power undiminished. A tool for revealing truth, for cutting through deception, including the deceptions we tell ourselves. He would continue to carry it, to use it in service of justice rather than vengeance. As they navigated back through the death abyss, now noticeably calmer than during their approach, Alaric found himself looking forward rather than back. The multiverse was vast, its wonders and dangers equally limitless. And somewhere out there, heroes still fought against darkness, sometimes needing heroes of their own to come to their aid. He and his companions would be those heroes, not perfect, not unscarred, but determined to protect what mattered most, the freedom of souls to chart their own courses across the infinite seas of possibility. The soul-stealing cosmic witch had indeed collected heroes, but in the end, it was Alaric's soul, resilient, compassionate despite its wounds, and ultimately forgiving, that had changed everything. And as the stars welcomed them back into their eternal dance, Alaric finally understood that some quests end not with the defeat of an enemy, but with the transformation of both pursuer and pursued into something neither could have imagined alone.